Welcome to Man About Danville with Logan H. Gurman, a podcast for Danville, Kentucky, and beyond. Conversations with friends, and you get to listen. Brought to you by the Logan Company, a commercial and residential real estate brokerage for Danville and Central Kentucky. 80% Danville-centric, 20% eccentric.
Good morning, Danville, Kentucky. Welcome to Man About Danville with me, the man about Danville himself, Logan H. Gurman. You are listening to the leading podcast, the fastest growing podcast for Danville, Boyle County, and the surrounding region of Central Kentucky. Thank you for joining me wherever you are listening here in Danville, Perryville, Junction City, down on the Fork, Harrodsburg, Lexington, Louisville, Indianapolis, Portland, Oregon, Atlanta, Denver, Nashville, Chattanooga, Memphis, Little Rock, or in the Southern Hemisphere, Southeast Asia. I consider it a real honor and privilege that you choose to spend part of your day with me. If you enjoy this podcast, I hope you would consider sharing it. Wherever you listen, there should be a little share button up at the top. If you would hit that and post it to the social media platform of your choosing, I'd appreciate it. Be sure to tag me so I can thank you personally. Welcome to episode 23. While I knew that I had a year's worth of interesting people to talk to, I don't know that I actually thought this podcast would take off the way it has. I didn't know I'd get this far down the road with it. I have gotten so much positive feedback from everybody. I sincerely appreciate your encouragement. This episode almost did not exist. With school starting back and business picking up, producing this podcast every week is something of a labor of love. Besides the guys in the production booth here at the worldwide headquarters, I do everything else. I book the guests, I prep the interviews, I write the show, I collect the information for What's Up Danville, I edit the show, I distribute the show, I market the show, I even sell the t-shirts. It's turned into its own full-blown part-time side hustle. All that being said, I'm going to give myself some grace and not commit to this being a weekly endeavor. I like the weekly format, but I'm going to allow myself the opportunity to skip a week here and there in the future for the sake of my sanity. So, I love doing the show, and I love talking to friends, and I love that you all get to listen, but if I take a week off here and there, bear with me, I'm not going anywhere. This episode actually was recorded much earlier in the spring of 2020, before my guest Michael Graves graduated from West Point. When he got back to campus, the West Point requested that cadets refrain from talking to the media before the graduation ceremony, but now all that is behind us. Michael has since graduated and been commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army and has graciously granted me permission to release this episode. So, without further ado, Lieutenant Michael Graves. Today, I have a special guest with me. He's a 2016 graduate of Danville High School. He will shortly be commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And just before he becomes an officer in the United States Army, he will be a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Another man about Danville, but not for much longer, Mr. Michael Graves. Michael, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Logan.
Of all the people that you know in Danville, why do you think that I, Logan H. Gurman, have been your biggest role model here in town?
Well, it's hard to put into words, but you always have been.
That's a great answer. Thanks for being with us today. That's about all I need to know, and I'll be making sure your parents get a copy of today's show. In all seriousness, I've known you since I moved back to Danville. You were probably 8 or 9 at the time. Got to know your parents. Your dad is a pediatrician here in town. Your mom is now a teacher, but she has been on the Danville School Board. We met them shortly after my wife Leland and I moved back to town. And they've been wonderful friends to us, and I've had the pleasure of watching you grow up and matriculate through Danville High School and on to West Point, and it's just been a real pleasure watching you grow up and succeed in so many different areas. I think the first question I want to ask you is, how did you come to the decision to attend West Point?
Well, I originally started looking at all of the academies, so it's Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, and West Point. 7th or 8th grade, I knew I wanted to join the military and I wanted to go to college and get a good education. So I started looking at the academies, spent a long time applying, went and visited each of them and decided I liked West Point the best, and here we are 4 years later.
Military service is not something new to you. Your dad was in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. Both your maternal and both your mother's father and your father's father were both in the Army.
Correct.
So you have grown up in a family that understands military service and the pros and cons that go with it. So this was a measured decision on your part. Talk about the process to get in West Point. That was arduous?
To say the least. So there's two main routes that you have to follow. The first is an actual application to the school, which isn't unsimilar from applying to a normal college. And the other is getting a congressional nomination. So that can come from your congressman, either of the two state senators, or the vice president or the president. So the application side to the school looks, like I said, a lot like normal colleges, lots of essays and things like that. And then applying for the congressional nomination is a little bit different. Some require heavy interviews, some you just send a packet describing yourself, questionnaire, stuff like that. But to actually get an appointment to West Point, you have to be accepted and receive a nomination.
So with the coronavirus vacation that we're all on, you were sent home from West Point earlier in the spring. How have you been keeping yourself busy?
Well, so we went on our spring break on March 6th, I believe. Spent a lovely week in the Bahamas. And right before we came back, we got an email to not come back for another 2 weeks. So I went back to school, grabbed a couple clothes, and immediately headed back to Kentucky for what was going to be a 2-week extended vacation. Shortly thereafter, it turned to online classes, as I believe most universities did. So up until recently, I've spent most of my days sitting at my desk doing homework, attending virtual classes, much like I would at school. And then on the weekends, I've been doing a lot of fishing, hanging out around the house, going to the lake, trying to get out as much as possible.
You're finished with classes and exams so far, right?
Yes.
And where were you this morning?
This morning, I was at, we'll say, a secret
a neighbor's undisclosed location.
A little farm pond doing some fly fishing.
And you've been making your own rod, tying your own flies?
I have. That was my first big quarantine project, was to make a fly rod. And as you know, my dad's been making them for maybe 6-8 months or so, and he's better than I am, but we're both still learning. So that was a fun process.
I'm glad to see you're on to fly fishing too, like everybody else. And I'm glad to see I started this podcast as a quarantine project, and you've gone on to making rods and flies, and I'm glad to see you're keeping yourself busy. I assume you're just saving a ton of money by building your own rod, right?
You do save a lot of money?
No, you don't.
But you spend money that you wouldn't normally spend. It's like buying something that's on sale. You know, maybe I saved $200 building a rod, but I also spend $100 that I wouldn't normally spend.
You had to get some upgrades and some extra equipment, and yeah, I know how that goes. All right, back to West Point. What was your major at West Point?
I'm a computer science major.
And you told me the last time we saw each other about your senior project you were working on. Can you talk about that, or is it double top secret?
I can't talk about that, I don't think.
You really can't?
No.
That's awesome. Well, I was really going to talk about that. Let me back up. I never served in any branch of the military. I don't think any of them would have me. A lot of people who know me, I'm not big on uniforms. They would frown on the flare. I would add, because I throw on an ascot or a snappy different kind of hat. I like to wear a straw hat in the summertime, and they're all one color all the time. So I was not cut out for the military. I have an enormous amount of admiration, though, for people who are, and for people who can put themselves through the trials and tribulations to become a part of something like the U.S. Military Academy. What was the toughest part of your 4 years?
So most people would probably assume cadet basic training, which similar to basic training for anyone who enlists, but it's all run at West Point, run by cadets. And that's 6 weeks of asking somebody to go to the bathroom and getting yelled at and doing a lot of push-ups. But everybody knows what that's going to be coming in. So that's tough. But the hardest part is then, in my opinion, you get to your freshman year, or as we call it, plebe year, and you get your phone back and you get a computer and you get to see what all your friends are doing. So all your friends are at the University of Kentucky or Center College, and they're going to parties or they're going to the Derby.
They're wearing shorts.
And I'm sitting in upstate New York wearing wool pants, getting yelled at, taking out the trash in the morning, cleaning the bathrooms, and sometimes regretting that decision.
Well, I bet 4 years later, now that you're on the precipice of it being finished with it, those regrets have faded away.
They have.
What was your favorite part of your 4 years at West Point, or a couple of good stories?
Well, I would say, and most people that you would talk to would say this, the best part about West Point is the people, which is 100% true. There's just so many great people, everybody you meet. We live and do most of our work in academic companies made up of about 120 people that's split between seniors and freshmen and sophomores and juniors. And every company has their own culture, And then in the summers, we get mixed up and we're in different companies. So you make all these great friends, and then you have to leave them. But then after a couple days, you realize you made all these other great friends, and there's just so many good people.
When a place is that selective on who they let in, I'm guessing there are not a lot of duds in the crowd.
No, not a lot of duds. There are a lot of different people, though. We take from all over the U.S., and we have a lot of foreign cadets, too. In my company, throughout my 4 years, we've had cadets from Bosnia, Spain, France, South Korea, and Tunisia.
Now, how does that work? Did their governments or military send them over to West Point for training?
So there's two different kinds, really. There's some that are here for all 4 years, and some only for a semester. So the semester cadets are usually an exchange. So take France or Spain, for example. They'll send a couple cadets to West Point. We send a couple cadets to their military academy, and then they come back at the end of the semester. But for the 4 years, their government and their military sends their cadets over. They wear our uniform. They train with us for all 4 years, and then after their service, they go back to their countries. And that program was started a long time ago, and now a lot of the higher-ranking people in these foreign countries' militaries trained with us and have great relationships with the U.S. Army.
Your dad mentioned that you like the outdoor training.
I do. I love fishing and hunting and hiking and backpacking. So the summer trainings at West Point, you spend a lot of times sleeping under the trees. Sometimes it's really hot, sometimes it's really cold, but it's always fun to be outside.
Are you out for a week at a time, or?
Some of the trainings so we have, I'm sure they're classified as dorms out at Camp Buckner, which is where we do all of our summer training. In reality, they were built as POW camps during World War II.
That's good training.
That is good training. It's more of a shed than a dorm, a very long shed with a bunch of bunk beds. So we'll sleep in there and then go out in the field for up to 14, 15 days at a time. But that's a lot of fun. The bays, as they're called, the long sheds, it's a good time.
Are you going back up for graduation?
I am. So at the end of May.
Nobody knows what day or month it is. So
at the end of May, we'll go back. We're going in a couple different groups, and we're all getting screened and tested for COVID-19, and then we'll be quarantined to finish up a lot of exit paperwork and get all our stuff, turn in a bunch of stuff, and then graduate on June 13th, and then be back here.
Who's your commencement address speaker?
This year it is President Donald Trump.
That's pretty cool having the President of the United States come deliver your graduation address. So then you graduate, you get commissioned the same day?
So we'll actually be commissioning on May 23rd.
Is that the next day?
No. So that's 4 weeks before we graduate.
Okay. I have limited experience with my college roommate was commissioned hours after we graduated.
Mm-hmm.
That's where.
So that's how it usually is, because we were supposed to graduate on May 23rd.
Okay.
So graduation would occur, everyone would toss their hats, and then go do their commissioning ceremonies with friends and family. But with the quarantine, with the lockdown, we're still commissioning on May 23rd, so that'll be our legal date of rank. And then June 13th is when we actually go up for graduation.
So you're going to sit around in quarantine for a while in between?
Yes.
Okay. Your parents going to get to go up?
I don't know. They haven't made a call on if families are going to be in attendance, but I would say no. No need to go up to New York.
Gosh, that would be sick that your child is graduating from West Point and you don't get to be there for the graduation or the commissioning. So then they give you, the summer off? Or
traditionally, you would have between 30 and 60 days of leave.
Okay. I thought maybe they just put you on a armored personnel carrier and send you on to your next assignment. But
no, so traditionally you have between 30 and 60 days, and at the end of that you report to your BOLIC post, which is Basic Officer Leadership Course.
You haven't got enough leadership training after 4 years at West Point. You need a little refresher?
Just a little bit more. So that course is specific to your branch. So
okay.
You branch armor like I did, you go down to Fort Benning, and you have armor BOLIC, where you're going to be driving tanks. So that'll be the next 8 months or so, and then after that I'll report to Fort Hood, Texas.
All right. So why armor? And explain what armor is, and then how you got. I guess I'd rather drive through a war zone than walk through it. So good call there.
Yeah. So armor is tanks, Bradleys, Strykers, any armored vehicle. They say why carry your weapon when your weapon can carry you?
Beautiful.
So
that makes perfect sense.
I would say there's two main reasons. One, my granddad was a tanker, and I just kind of grew up around the tanks and think it's really fun. It's one of the combat arms branches, but you don't have to carry anything heavy, so that's nice. And 2, your branch goes by your class rank. So if you're number 1 in the class, you can do whatever you want. If you're where I am in the class, you get to go armor.
So on to Fort Hood. How long will you be at Fort Hood, and then do you have any idea where you'll be headed after that?
So probably around 3 years, and no idea where I'm going after that.
Okay. Does computer science relate to the vehicles you'll be operating at that point?
None whatsoever. So whatever you choose to major in at school has almost zero correlation with your branch.
Okay.
Unless you want to branch cyber core. It helps if you have a cyber-related major. Or if you want to branch engineers, sometimes it helps if you have an engineering-related major. But there's no correlation between the two.
So what are you going to do in the when do you go to Fort Hood or Benning? Is it Fort Benning, Georgia?
Yeah, Fort Benning, end of July.
So you will have a couple of months to do something.
Well, so I'll get back on like June 14th. So I'll have from like June 14th until July 29th to
month to 6 weeks or so. Going to do anything or more fishing?
The DoD travel ban goes until June 30th, I think. So I can't go outside of a 60-mile radius. So I've just been running circles around the radius, trying to find places to go fishing.
So Lake Cumberland is fortunately within 60 miles, and
our river house is 59.8 miles.
What else we want to talk about? Any other good stories from West Point?
Oh, the Army-Navy games.
Yeah. Talk about the Army-Navy games.
So one of the things that people immediately think about when they hear West Point or the Naval Academy is the Army-Navy game.
And your parents have gone. It's usually held in Philadelphia.
So it rotates between different cities that are between Annapolis and West Point.
Okay, and your parents have gone up at least a couple of times.
I think they've been to 3 of them.
Okay.
3, yeah. So my freshman year or plebe year, it was in Baltimore, Maryland.
Real close to Annapolis.
Mm-hmm, real close. Not really middle ground. And then the last 3 years, it's been in Philadelphia. So my freshman year, that game, we had a 14 or 15-year losing streak, and we broke the streak that year in 2016. And that game will probably be one of the greatest sporting events of my whole life. It was awesome. We were sitting front row, and we have our big 20-pound dress coats on, and it was, 15, 20 degrees, and we've been sitting out there for 10 hours. And then we broke the 14 or 15-year streak and all stormed the field. So
as a first year, as a plebe, is that the right term? Did you get to go early and save seats?
No. So the game starts at 1 or 2. We usually march on at around noon, and I think we show up at 7 or 8, and we stand in the parking lot. They have one parking lot for all the cadets and all the midshipmen, and we stand there for several hours and then march out. And so
it sounds like a great way to spend December afternoon in Philadelphia. But that game, there's very little competition for football games when that game is played, and that is like the whole country's watching it. And I know literally around the world, members of the armed services are listening to it, cheering one way or the other. I know you've got some good stories. You just aren't telling me.
I've been able to travel a lot in my 4 years at West Point. See, we started going with Puerto Rico, Mexico, Turks and Caicos, Barbados, Bahamas, Italy.
Michael, you told me last summer you spent with some friends hiking in the Alps.
Yeah, we did. So it was myself, my roommate, and another good friend in our company, and we decided to hike the Tour de Mont Blanc, which circumnavigates Mont Blanc. It starts in Les Ouches, France, goes through Italy and Switzerland. We had about 2 weeks to hike it, which would put us about 10 miles a day, but we had some miscalculations early on. Yep. So I mapped everything out, and I had where each of our stops were going to be. I spent 2 weeks or so planning everything out, and we got off the bus from the airport, showed up to our first campsite, and it was a construction lot and had been for about a year or 2. So right off the bat, the whole itinerary was gone, and we hiked about 5 miles, just set up our tents in some cow pasture somewhere in the French Alps, and that's how it started.
You had plenty of daylight that time of year, too.
We did. And I think most people that hike the trail stay in the hostels or the refugios, but we just brought tents because it's cheaper. So we slept outside every night. And since we were going through it a lot faster than we thought we would, that gave us time to stop in a couple of the towns and stay a day or 2. We stayed in Courmayeur, Italy, beautiful town in the Alps. And then we still finished our hike a couple days early.
How many miles a day were you averaging on foot?
Between 20 and 25 a day.
The hiking program at West Point really strengthened your hiking skills if you can hike 20 miles a day around the Alps with a backpack carrying your own tent.
Well, we weren't in the hot and humid woods of upstate New York. We didn't have clunky boots and pants and 50-pound backpacks and helmets and rifles. We had shorts and T-shirts and 20-pound packs, and the weather was beautiful, the scenery was beautiful, and it was hard to not just walk from dawn till dusk.
Plenty of daylight and nothing to do when you stopped other than take a break and sleep, so keep on walking. Most of the guys that you were at West Point with went straight out of high school. Were there any guys that had previously been enlisted and then did their term of service 3 or 4 years as an enlisted soldier and then came to West Point?
Yeah, so there's, I would say a majority, probably 80 to 90% come straight from high school to the academy. But there's also a lot of people that go to college for a year or two, go to a prep school for a year or two, and then a lot who enlist and then come to West Point. And those are people who maybe didn't know about West Point, maybe didn't know what they wanted to do coming out of high school, so they enlisted. Somebody along the way, picked them up or took them under their wing and said, apply to West Point. And it's not an easy path. Most of them already a year or two into their enlisted career, and then they usually go to the prep school for a year, and then West Point for 4 years. So they'll graduate being significantly older than the rest of us. But
I would think coming in after having been in the Army for a couple of years will give you a totally different perspective on the first 6-week camp, or as you were describing.
Yeah. Not only a better perspective on West Point, they definitely understand the game a little earlier on. They're leaders amongst everyone else. But then once they become junior officers, I think they can relate a lot better with the junior enlisted soldiers as a junior officer, as a platoon leader. So it definitely gives them a different worldview and a little more perspective, and helps us out as cadets because they have a lot more insight than we do. So it's a great overall experience.
Have you had any intern opportunities while at West Point?
I did. So we have, during our summers, we have a lot of mandatory training, and then we have some optional stuff. So one of the optional trainings I did was an internship at Lockheed Martin. So I was with the Missiles and Fire Control Center in Orlando, Florida. So that was the summer between my sophomore and junior year, and I spent 3 weeks in Orlando working at Lockheed Martin, and it was amazing. It was a really great experience. Orlando was beautiful, did a lot of fishing, and I was by myself for 3 weeks in a big hotel room, so not much else to do.
No roommate, no fellow company members.
Nobody.
Bunked up in the top bunk or the bottom bunk or the bunk next to you. Not a lot of privacy at West Point.
Not a lot of privacy. The barracks are like most college dorms. Sorry.
Well, I don't know that they are. But college dorms these days are nice.
Yeah. I think they're like college dorms are when most people who listen to this were in college.
Okay.
I'm thinking Kerwin and Landing Towers.
A nice concrete block interior wall.
Exactly. Concrete. And each room is 2 or 3 people. It's about the size of this office. Has a sink and a mirror, and then communal bathrooms for the floor, big open prison showers. And
the academics pretty rigorous up there too.
They are. So we have, I want to say, 36 different academic majors, somewhere around there. So the hardest, engineering and computer science and biology and chemistry. I think several of our engineering programs are ranked top in the country.
Well, engineering as a discipline evolved from military science. It was trying to figure out how far are we going to throw that rock through that castle wall, and thus was born calculus.
So West Point is actually the oldest engineering school in the country.
Okay.
It was founded in 1802, and when it was first started, everyone was engineering.
And you said your major was computer science.
It is. I started as civil engineering, actually, coming in. And then after about a semester of that, I went to my academic counselor or advisor, and I said, sir, I think I'm going to change majors. And he said, no, don't worry. It's tough. You can find something else. And I said, I think I'm going to change to computer science. Why would you do that? That's just as hard, if not harder than civil engineering. But it was just something I was more interested in, and I knew if I was going to be staying up until 4 a.m. every night doing homework, I wanted to wanted to be something I'd be interested in.
At some point, your military career will be over. I don't know whether it'll be 5, 10, 30 years hence, but the technology probably will still be around and we'll probably still making innovations and it'll probably still be important. You probably ought to be able to get a job with a degree from West Point in computer engineering.
I plan on getting a master's either within the next 5 years and paying for it, or after I get out of the Army after my 5-year service, or if I stay in 8 or 10 years and get a GI Bill. But I plan on getting out of the Army, getting a master's in something computer science related, and then looking for a job.
You know what? You got to get you one of them internet startups. There's big money. There's not a lot of money in podcasting, but I hear internet startups is a place to be.
Well, I do have a couple apps.
Do you really?
No, not made. In the think tank.
Okay.
So those are going to be my $1 million ideas.
You can tell me about them just as soon as we turn off the mics. All right, well, what are you going to be doing this weekend? What are your plans within 60 miles of the house?
Well, it's hard to think what I'm even going to be doing tonight.
Today's Thursday.
Today is Thursday. I thought it was Tuesday. The days all kind of just blend together.
Yes, they do.
Probably just fishing down on Lake Cumberland.
All right, working on your fly rod, testing it out, working the kinks out of it. Mm-hmm. All right, Michael Graves, I think that's all my questions. Thanks so much for being with me. Thanks for taking time out of your busy life. You've got your entire future ahead of you, and it looks so very bright once we get out of this corona business. You have my thanks and my admiration for your dedication to your country and the service you were poised to deliver. And I just want to say thank you for coming on and talking with me.
Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely my favorite Danville podcast.
Thank you. I think I may be the premier Danville podcast.
I think you should start with that.
I think so. I've got merch coming.
Oh,
I'll get you some merch before you leave town. All right, that's all I got. That's a wrap. Thanks for being with us. Go Army.
Beat Navy.
But wait, don't go anywhere because you know what it's time for. What's up, Danville? Boyle County Youth Soccer signups this week are, in fact, live. Check their Facebook page for a link by which you can sign your child up for youth soccer. The starting age, I think, is around 4 for the 6 and under teams, and then it's broken down every couple of years, 6 and unders, 8 and unders, 10 and unders, etc. Great organization, a great way to get your child outside after being stuck at home with virtual learning all week. And it's football time in the Bluegrass. Football returns this Friday night, 7:30, with Boyle County kicking off at home against our rowdy neighbors to the north, the Mercer County Titans. I will say, no matter the winner of the game, Danville will still remain the birthplace of the Commonwealth. Looks like the game will be on a pay-per-view basis on team1prep.com. Yes, I know, pay-per-view for high school sports. Who would have thought of that? But the cost seems pretty analogous to one adult regular admission. So if you can't get into the game, and there will be limited seating, I think the athletes are limited to 4 tickets or vouchers per player. So if you can't get to the game, check it out on Team 1 Prep. Coach Phi and the Big Rebel News do an excellent job of producing the game. In fact, shout out to my son who will be on the production team this Friday night. Yes, I am a Boyle County homer. That's where I went. That's where my kids go. But somebody from Danville holler at me and get me their schedules. Why don't you get Coach Clevenger on the show for me while you're at it? Love to talk to him. And whatever other teams in the area. Mercer County, Lincoln County, Casey County, Washington, Garrett County. Let me know what's going on with your teams. If you can't go to the game tonight, why don't you check out the Boldly Resilient Pop-Up Cafe on Friday evening? You know the drill. It happens down at Whizziger Park downtown. Go pick up a meal from your favorite local restaurant. Take it to Whizziger Park. Eat with your friends while being socially and appropriately distanced. And the team from the Chamber of Commerce, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Heart of Danville, City of Danville, I think maybe the Parks and Recs involved, they'll all make sure that everything is cleaned up and wiped down, and you get to enjoy what's turning out to be some great fall weather here in the Commonwealth. Then while you're at it on Saturday morning, go back in downtown and visit the Farmers Market in Constitution Square. They've got everything. They've got flowers, they've got vegetables, they've got meat products. They've even got more than that. Go check them out and say hi to Jeff Jewell while you're down there from the Chamber of Commerce. What's going on in our arts community? Of course, I've talked about it before. Central Kentucky Center for the Arts is doing their 5K in September. Go check it out, artcenterky.org. Be sure and get the cool t-shirt with an Edvard Munch reference. Normally this time of year, my friend Steve Hoffman, the director of the Norton Center, would be announcing the lineup for the coming season, but, the COVID, so they're not doing that. But here's what they are doing. On Thursday, September 17th at 7:30, they are having another one of their culture series online at This is Culture in Esports. Join the Norton Center for an examination of how the arts intersect with the growing world of esports. We're not talking about Space Invaders or Asteroids Atari games you remember, but global cultural and entertainment craze that is challenging the traditional sporting events for sponsorship, revenue sales, and Gen Z interest. Rumor has it that my personal friend Damian Lehman will be on the panel. He's a multi-sports coach at Boyle County and won the first esports title in the state a couple of years ago. It's free, but you have to pre-register. Look up the Norton Center on Facebook. There will be links. I'll put links in the show. If you have an item that would fall into one of these categories, sports, the arts, or what's going on in the not-for-profit community, holler at me, ManAboutDanville@gmail.com, and I will try to get your event or item worked in. I've got a special Man About Danville follow-up item. My guest last week was jockey agent Liz Morris. Congratulations to her. Her jockey Gabe Saez on his big news finished third in the Derby. I'm not saying that her jockey plays so well because she came on the show, but I'm not saying it hurt anything either. If you want to know more about her, she was my guest on episode 22. I'd like to thank my guest, Lieutenant Michael Graves, for joining me. I'll try to get links up to everything in the show notes. Do you want to get in touch with the show, talk about the show, or real estate? Holler at me, ManAboutDanville@gmail.com. As I have mentioned before, I've got a special opportunity for you to be my physical neighbor. You can buy the office building next door. Send me an email if you want to talk about that. It's right next door to the worldwide headquarters here. It's in downtown Danville, and we could be neighbors. There are sponsorship opportunities for this podcast, so if you would like for me to mention your for-profit organization, let me know. I can work that into the show too. You can find me on my website, ManAboutDanville.com. Email, as I've said, ManAboutDanville@gmail. On Instagram, ManAboutDanville. Twitter handle is @ManDanville. And, of course, Facebook, ManAboutDanville.com. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Google Podcasts, just about anywhere else. You can even use your Amazon Echo. And I'm on the YouTube. If you have a moment, hit the subscribe button wherever you listen. I also really appreciate it when you take the time to give me a rating or review. Those are always welcome. Be well. Have a good weekend, and as always, thanks for listening.
That's it. We're out. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Subscribe to Man About Danville wherever you access your favorite podcasts, and be sure to tell your friends about us. You've been listening to Man About Danville with Logan H. Gurman, brought to you by the Logan Company, a commercial and residential real estate brokerage for Danville and Central Kentucky. Know someone who would be a good guest? Want to be a guest yourself? Have an idea for the show? Get in touch with us. Find all our contact information on the web at ManAboutDanville.com. Thanks for joining us.